Hello, everybody, and welcome to this video on skill acquisition. And we're talking about skill acquisition from a technical perspective, the executing of a technical skill, and also skill set is decision making as well. So it's not just the repetition of a technical skill, it's the how, the when, the where to use it. And obviously, in ecological dynamics, that is not based on prior memory, that is based on a current feedback loop. So let's start off with the real basics here. Is a technique in itself is a self-organizing thing. And what I mean by that is you look here with the photo, this is somebody hitting a tennis ball. They never, even though the forehand looks like it's always the same stroke, it's not. The body is always self-organizing. So when that racket head comes to finally hit the ball and make contact, it is in the right spot. And that backward movement, when you're bringing the racket back, it's always going on a different line. It's always going on a different line as you're getting ready to contact the ball. As it goes away from that point of stabilization, because there's a certain movement, you're not going to throw the racket above your head for a forehand. You stay within a certain range of stability. And whenever it gets out of that range, you start to self organize and bring it back into that range where the sweet spot hits the ball. So, no matter what technique you're performing, it's always a self organizing thing where you're always staying and trying to stay in this stability range. Now, in this, it's important to understand that one of the reasons no technique is ever going to be the same is because nobody's body is the same. Your coordination, your flexibility, all these things are unique to who you are as an athlete. Now, look here, there's two different saves. Now, David De Gea is very, very comfortable making an underhanded save to the top corner. Most goalkeeping coaches would say that has to be an overhand save, like you see over there in the other picture, but he can actually make both types of saves. And this is about exploring your possibilities. There is no right or wrong. So if you're going to teach a technique and say it has to be done this way or this way, it there's no right technique for everybody, and every repetition is a unique repetition. Remember, the ball is moving. You have to couple your physical actions to real-time information, which is the reflection of light in ecological dynamics. So nothing is ever the same. So we are always out self-organizing. Now, this is a little bit about Peter Cech. Peter Cech would practice catching ping pong balls. He would do all sorts of things outside the norm. It wasn't totally game representative with a real soccer ball in a real goal. His goal here is to explore different movement patterns to catch ping pong balls coming from a machine, different size balls. And what he would say is this: it took him outside of that range of stability that he always had with his movements while saving a soccer ball in a highly representative situation. So he explored different ways to move to save the ping pong balls. And he said in an 11v11 game, he found himself saving, making saves with a regular soccer ball using motions, movement patterns that he learned saving the ping pong balls and different size balls, and using, sending the balls off a tarp with water on it and so forth. All these things help him explore. And this is a little bit of a key and a look into differential learning of different experiences. Those experiences now are the teacher. I'm not saying to Peter Cech, put your arm this way or this way or this way to save that ping pong ball. He's exploring that on his own. And it's the interaction between him and the environment that are allowing him to gain a new skill set. Now, when we talk about destabilizing motion, we can movements, we can do all types of things with constraints. We can constrain how the player can move. We can constrain the balls that they're using. They can use a beach ball. You name it. Each thing is going to help the athlete explore new movements. You can have them explore movements when one part of their body is doing something and the other part of the body is doing something else, and they're trying to kick this beach ball in the goal. You name it, it's all about exploration. So it's funny because everyone thinks that creativity is when you give people absolute freedom. But when you use constraints and you take options away from people, that's when the creativity really starts to shine through. So, this thing about environments creating unique skill sets is massive. We often think of, hey, I'm going to get my kid a supplemental trainer. They're going to teach him how to volley, how to hit a push pass, how to hit the ball at the outside of the foot, ball control, teach him these techniques. We're going to check it off this spreadsheet. I mean, in essence, the Corver method was sort of like that. But what people miss is this. If you play cage soccer, if you play futsal, if you play beach soccer, those skill sets are simply they're created by the environment and the interaction between the player and the environment. There is no coach imparting knowledge. Adjust your body position this way, turn your foot this way. That's not happening. It is the player in an unstable training environment dealing with variability. It could be a bumpy field, it could be futsal, it could be beach soccer. Ronaldinho would often say, people don't understand the touches I take on the grass because I learned those touches on the beach. Neymar credits most of his foot skills to his involvement with futsal over the years. Now, we can call those things donor sports, and donor sports are something that is not just unique to soccer. So here we have in the middle, it's box lacrosse, and they always play a lot of box lacrosse in Canada because it's really cold. So they convert hockey rinks into, lacrosse, and the smaller goals, smaller field, and it develops this unique skill sets. And the coaches always say, listen, when we watch college lacrosse, we could tell the kids who play box lacrosse because they have a unique skill set and they develop that unique skill set playing in smaller spaces with smaller goals in this box lacrosse setting. You can see that American football, who study, maybe it's Wing Chun, maybe it's Gracie Jiu Jitsu, maybe it's wrestling, they have a different variety. Maybe it's judo of techniques when it comes to football, because now they can use those techniques to get by the offensive linemen. And that's what you would call a donor sport. Ice hockey for goalkeepers. You see how important foot saves are now. That's it. That would be considered a donor sport. Um, Listen, everything has to do with environments as well. It's funny because in hockey, like USA youth hockey, they don't always have a chance to get on the ice and warm up. The ice time is limited, so once they get on the ice, it's time to train. So their donor sport slash warm up is they play soccer because it's all about exploiting time and space. So you'll see the USA youth hockey team playing soccer outside of the ice because they don't have enough ice time to put their warm up on there. Thought that was a little bit interesting. You also have, we could go on and on with donor sports. Again, arena football has transformed play calling skill sets of quarterbacks because arena football is like 8 players in a small area, and it's different and it brings about these unique skill sets. I'm going to actually get into these videos in a second. And this is an interesting quote. And basically, this is just somebody saying that you cannot teach skills by verbal instruction. You can give a pointer here and there. And by the way, if you are going to make some sort of verbal instruction to a player about their skill set, about how to perform, say, a push pass, don't give them 5 different things to focus on them. Give them one thing. Hey, make sure your plant foot is pointing in the direction that you're going to pass the ball. That's it. Don't say anything about the ankle. Don't say anything about the foot being, the toe being up. Don't say anything about the knee being bent. And oftentimes, external cueing is, does that ball that you're hitting for that push pass go to your partner or maybe in between a gate? It is proven time and time again that if you put the focus on the end result, the technique is going to be improved. The skill set is going to get better. Don't focus, because what happens is, I'll use golf as an example. If you're going to focus on all these individual parts of a golf swing, it's not made to be done like that. It's going to essentially screw up the natural flow of that golf swing. you are not wired for it like that. You need to have a fluid swing, and you cannot be focusing on 10 different components into chunks on that golf swing. It needs to be a natural motion. If you need to focus on one thing, focus on one thing, but make it a very, very narrow focus. So I can remember giving a phone call to again one of the top Aikido teachers in New York City, and they were explaining that the way they practice, and they were saying we do the same thing every day, and I'm saying, oh, that's really interesting, same thing every day. I kind of failed to see the value in that, and I said, well, tell me more about it. He said, well, every 5 minutes we switch partners, so now you're going with a 6'2" person, you're going with a 5'2" person, a person at 300 pounds, person at 200 pounds, person at 140 pounds. All these things create massive variability, and variability is one of the things that's going to force the practitioner to find new solutions and explore new movement solutions and explore new techniques, and that's massive when it comes to skill acquisition. So, but here's the thing: rote training, right? Hey, we're just going to do this push pass 5,000 times against the wall, or we're going to do 3,000 touches. I remember this was a big thing. Hey, my kids can get 3,000 touches in every day by themselves. Great, I'm not against it, but let's be honest, it's not representative. You do not have to continue to do the same thing over and over and over again, because you're not practicing the when, the where, and the how. Those things have to be experienced. So you have to adapt these skills in a real game representative setting, and that develops the soccer brain as well, because now it's all about decision making and adapting your technique. Don't think that you could just do hit a ball against the wall and your push pass is there. It's there forever. There's so many other things about the where, when, and the how. I'll give you an example. In golf, they used to say, listen, we'll spend 4 hours on the driving range every day. And then that train of thought has kind of shifted now. Hey, how about playing a round of golf with only four clubs, right? Well, what do you mean four clubs? Well, now you're going to have to hit each club differently, and you're going to have to explore what you can do with those clubs. How about you can't ever hit the ball on the green direct from the fairway? You're going to, okay, great. It's another constraint. So, all these types of things, now you're adding constraints. You're only using four clubs, much different in skill development than sitting with a bucket of balls and hitting the same shot from the range time and time again. And I think this brings us into a really interesting study. I think I mentioned briefly in the last video, but the study is very important. It's basically saying kids improve their passing more when they were in game-based trainings compared to isolated drills just that were just made for passing. For me, that says a lot. It means stop the isolated drills as much as you possibly can. Um, Isolated technical training can be done with a supplemental trainer. You can do your own isolated technical training at home. But when you're in a team setting, that's a decision making time, and you need to adapt your technique in game representative trainings. So, passing patterns and stuff like this. You see a million coaches doing passing patterns. Now, there is some decent things. For me, there's a couple reasons why you do a passing pattern. Okay, we're going to receive with the back foot. We're not going to have any wasted steps in between. We're going to coordinate the movement of the player you're passing to based upon when your head comes up. So the movement is coordinated. You play into their correct foot. Okay, that's the basics. It's good. How much can be expanded on that and really gain from that? In my opinion, not that much. So once you get the basics down, then there's very little value going forward. But then can you mix up the distances? Can you make these things so it's one touch, so it's two touch, three touch, whatever it is, in these little different rhythms, right? Because you want people to discover and explore different rhythms. So don't think you have to set up these passing patterns where each person is 15 yards apart. We whack it into the back foot. No, maybe they're 3 yards apart. Maybe it's quick little combinations inside, outside the foot. Maybe you give them flexibility and how they can touch the ball, so forth. So you're exploring new rhythms. That's another part of a passing pattern. And then sometimes you can just do these things as a warm up or on a low workload day. But don't think that these things, like a passing pattern day after day after day, is actually improving the skill sets of your players. That's not necessarily the case. So that would be my thing about isolated rote training: is no repetition is ever the same. So if you're going to set up an exercise where it's not game representative, you're losing that variability. But there's some things that we have to take into effect of how many times do you hit a bicycle kick or a left-footed volley in training? If it's twice every, 4 months, you need to work on those things. Those things justify extra training and rote training, in my opinion. Let's hit, 50 left-footed volleys, 50 bicycle kicks. But here's my thing: use variability. If you're going to do these isolated things, use variability. Don't do it. Serve the ball from different angles. Serve it with your hands. Serve it with your feet. Use different sized balls. You name it. Let's use a ton of variability for skill acquisition. And the other thing is this: like, just because you taught a kid math or English or science, the methods that you use to teach that, there's only one answer. And normally there's only one way to get to that answer. In soccer, there's a million different ways to score a goal, there's a million different ways to get by a defender. It is not the same. So do not think that you could take one domain and transfer that to a dynamic environment like soccer and it's going to work in that domain, or that it's the answer. I would really, really caution about switching domains. Hey, it worked in music, it has to work in soccer. It's not the case. A master educator who's great in the classroom has to have the answers on the soccer field. No, not for me. No, I'm not saying there's no value. You can find value for sure. You could find things. Hey, that they do this in music that I really like, but apply it to the academic theory. Apply it. That's why we study academic theory. If it doesn't make sense with the academic theory, we have to keep going. We have to keep asking questions. I'm going to show you two little videos here that I thought were pretty interesting. Let's see. So this one right here is a player. You see, he flicked it over his head. He only played beach soccer and futsal. This is a player who I used to coach and watch. Normally, he does things as a right back. In this game, he's playing against the NCAA Division One team. And look at this. He's dribbling by people. And talk about a flexible game model, right? I'm not limiting what this kid could do because his skill set is simply unpredictable. Nobody knows what he's going to do, and they can't press him. And he learned this playing futsal. I mean, this is what he did. 14 years old was the first time he ever played 11 aside um, in a real soccer game. Let's take a look at this video. This one here is one of my ex-players. This is where he grew up playing in Ghana, and he went over last year and took this video for me. And let's be honest, look at the field. This relationship between the players and the environment, even in different parts of the field, requires so much adaptability. And this is a real feedback loop between the player and the environment. And look at the body positions that they're going to have to take, and look at the different techniques they're going to have to explore. At one point, this ball goes out and towards wide. This might happen here. It goes out wide. And it's just incredible. The field changes and it becomes even more difficult if that's possible. So the skill sets that these guys have in this environment, put them on a turf field. Oh my goodness, is it easy for them? Very, very simple for them. Again, as we continue to watch it, I find this very entertaining. It's really, really interesting to me. Again, this is and look at this part of the field, right? It's unbelievable. So for me, that's an environmental constraint. I would say if you could have your team play on this field once, twice a week, it would be amazing, right? So let me just pause that. So this was a pretty quick way. I just wanted to give you through my lens of how I view skill acquisition, skill development. Um, the biggest takeaways for me are unstable, variability, rote training is not needed. If you're going to give verbal instruction, keep it very, very small, 1 point only. Understand that technique, there is no technique that fits every person. Every person should adapt technique for what works for them. Every person tends to revert to stable motion of movement of stability. When you take people using differential learning techniques out of that stability of movement, they tend to explore more to see what's possible. And different environments create different skill sets between the relationship between the player and the environment. I want to get your thinking away from old school Corvair stuff. We dribble in between cones where we're coupling our actions to cones that have no representative game design. There's no changing of intentions. There's no changing. Um, there's no movement solutions. There's no nothing. The where, the when, the how, game representative training, adapting your technique, and really important to look at the study of players improve their passing technique more in game representative trainings than they did in isolated passing drills. So all these things, take it, put it into your back pocket, and if you value it, definitely put it into your own methodology. I'll see you in the next video.